Hello there. Thank you for taking a moment to watch this video. And on this particular training, I want to talk to you about our Zoho integration. And more specifically, I want to talk to you about how to track the total number of times you call a contact. Now, there may be situations where you want to only call a contact a certain number of times, or you're looking to build a list in Zoho for a specific group of contacts that have been called X number of times. Now, in Zoho, this is not easy to do out of the box, right? Even if you're logging your calls as activities here in Zoho, Zoho's not counting those up and keeping track of that for you. However, you can certainly build a workflow in Zoho to update a field in Zoho to keep track of this. So the first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to create a field to capture this data. I'm going to open up a new tab here. I would recommend that you create a new field that is a numeric field or a number field. So I'm just going to jump over to my contacts module. Let's go to the fields, and you'll see that I've got this field for total calls. I can get there, total calls. I've set it up as a number field. Now, once you have a number field, you need to create a workflow that's going to automatically update that field every time you make a call. So we're going to jump over to workflows. I'm going to leave this page open, but I'm going to go over here, another new tab. This is how I end up with 50 tabs by the end of the day. So here in automation, we're going to go to Workflow Rules. And you can see I already have one of these created, but we're going to start from scratch. I'm going to walk you through how to create this. So I'm going to click on Create Rule. And whenever you're creating a new rule, you have to define what module is going to initiate this new workflow, right? So in this particular case, we're looking at the calls module. Anytime a new call is logged, we want to perform an action, right? So we're going to go calls. Rule name is going to be total calls training. I can add a description, but I'm not, and I'm going to hit next. All right, so now we're going to create our workflow rule. So the first thing we need to do is define when it's going to trigger this workflow on a record action. And in this particular case, we're going to do it on outgoing call. So anytime an outgoing call is logged or modified. Unfortunately, you can't do it just when it's logged, so we have to do it based off of logged or modified, which should be fine. I don't imagine you're going to be modifying call activities too often. And then we're going to go ahead and hit next. And so now we need to define which calls would you like to apply this rule to. Now this may be different for you, but I'm going to leave this set to no. But you may potentially want to only log specific calls that have certain subject lines or certain things. So if you want to add additional conditions, then you'd want to set that to yes. But I'm going to go ahead and set this to no because in my particular example, I just want to go ahead and set this anytime a new outbound call is logged. I want to increase that total calls value by 1. So we're going to go ahead and hit next. And what we're going to do, you might think, hey, we're going to do a field update. We're going to go to fields, we're going to go to contacts, and we're going to choose a new update. We're going to find that total calls field, and we're going to set that value. The problem is we can't do any calculations here, so this is not the right approach. So we're going to go ahead and cancel out of that, cancel out of this. And for our instant action, it's actually going to be a function. So we're going to create a new function for this. So I'm going to click on New Function, and I'm going to write my own. I need to give the function a name. I'm going to call this Total Calls Training. And I can't remember if I have to put underscores here or not. I think I do. I don't know why they don't just automatically do that for us. Oh, put that in the wrong place. And for the display name, I'm going to set that to Total Calls, I can type, Training. I'm going to ignore the description and click Create. All right, so now I have a blank function. But what do I do in here? So the first thing I want to do is I want to add or edit some arguments. I want to create some arguments. I'm not sure what the best term for that is, but I'm going to create some arguments. The first one is going to be calls. And we're going to go ahead and grab the contacts module and total call. field, right? So I'm naming this argument calls, and it essentially equals the contact's total calls field. I'm going to create another argument. I'm going to name this one ID, and this is going to be this is for me to get the contact ID. All right, so we're going to go contact ID, done. So as I'm building out my function, I'm able to grab the contact ID or total calls field and use it in my function. So once I've got that created, now I need to start to build the function. Now I've already built this, so I'm not going to build it from scratch. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this in. And so rather than building this from scratch, I'm just going to talk you through what I've got here. So I've copied this in. I want to point out right here, this line number 2, I'm going to use this to take a null value, right? So if a contact doesn't have anything in there, it's empty, I want to make sure that is set to 0, because null or empty is not the same as 0. So in order for me to add another call to that count, there needs to be some value in there. So essentially what I'm doing is saying if the contact that was called has a null value, doesn't have any value in that total calls field, we want to set it to 0. Of course, if it's not null, or once it's been set to 0, we're going to move on to line 3, which is to actually perform our very basic calculation. We're going to take the calls value, which is either 0 or whatever other value, right? And we're going to add 1. So calls plus 1. And that becomes updated total calls in our function. So now we go down to line 5, which is to actually update the record. So in this particular case, we're updating the contact record using the ID that we got early on. And we're going to set the total calls field value to the updated total calls value that we just calculated in line 3. This is really important. This value right here needs to match, needs to match whatever the API name is for total calls. Now to get that, you go to your settings, go to APIs, go to API name. In this particular case, I'm going to contacts, and I'm going to go down to total calls. This is the value. It is case sensitive, so make sure you've got the upper cases and the lower cases. So what I recommend is just do a quick copy and paste. That way you are for sure going to update the correct field on the Zoho record. Now once you've got that done, you're going to go ahead and hit save and execute. It is going to ask you to put in some default values here just so that you can test it. So you can put in, you could leave this blank, put in a contact ID. You need to have an actual contact ID, so I usually just go in here and grab one from here. Throw that in, hit save, and then it's going to tell you if it's going to work or not. So in this particular case, it tells me, hey, because I didn't put a number in that, so it was null, right? So it tells me it was a 1. I could also try this with a 25. And you'll see it jumped it up to 26. So we've confirmed that it's working. So now I can go ahead and save that. Save my total calls training workflow rule, right? I don't want to have both of these running. So I'm going to go ahead and deactivate that one. So now I just have this one running. Now let's go to Sasha Sample, who has 26 calls. Let's begin a dial session to her. And we'll just mark her as no answer. Pause the session. Now let's go back to Sasha Sample. It may take a minute or so for that no answer call to come through. We'll do a quick refresh. There it is, and we should see that value is now 27. And of course, if it was blank, it would be now 1. So anyway, I hope that helps you and your team get more done using the power of FoneBurner. Thanks again, and happy dialing.